I invite Mr. Mukthar Al-Shibani to present his case study. He has established Almond Consulting Office for Disabled and Older People, Jeddah, KSA, to provide service in architectural design in the Arab region. He is currently the president of GAATES and a member of ISO committee TC 59/SC16 accessibility and usability of the built environment. He has served on the board of directors of the Saudi Umran Society and was the member of Saudi National Consulting Committee for setting the National Assembly for Disabled and member of the consulting committee Prince Salman Research Center for Disabled. Mr. Shibani,
yes, thank you.
10 minutes start now.
Thank you, Api. I would like to start something new regarding the tourism in Saudi Arabia, where we have the largest in-time tourists coming to the country and coming to Mecca and Medina. We receive more than 5 million people in a time. So this is the picture of the mosque when it is fully. It could accommodate more than 3 million people in the same time. This is the largest event in the world, you know, that you have 3 million people together in one place. What we are going to discuss today is something related to Hajj, to Mecca, and then that's an introduction to this big project that we have in Mecca, King Abdul Aziz Road. I present GATE to the Global Alliance on Accessible Technology and Environment, which is, we have some brochures outside. GATE is a leading organization to deal with accessibility in built environment and transportation. The concept of accessibility, we are all here to have, when we talk about cities, in a human cities, it is really something, humanitarian cities, that is inclusive cities. And now we talk about Hajj, where this is the location of Mecca on the red spot, and then we have the green color, the Islamic world, and the yellow color is the other Islamic minority in other not in Islamic countries. And this is the story of Hajj. On the left we see Mecca, and then people have to go in a certain time, which is just past last week. They go from Mecca to Mina, and then to Arafat, and back to Muzdalifah, and back to Mina, and then stay 3 days in Mina, and before they go back to Mecca. Now this is a diagram to show the sequence of traveling in Mecca, which is a 5 days journey for those 3 to 5 million people in the same time. And see, this is in Arafat, where we have the largest city to be built in for 1 day to accommodate those people, and it's an incredible city that start in the morning and finish in the evening. There is no other city in the world where you can build a city for 5 million people for 1 day only, but this is the rule. And this is the mountain of where Eve and Adam met, as they say, and people comes here for miracle, you know, and do some. Another picture, after the people comes back from Arafah to Mina, they have to throw stones to evil, and they have to be in as we can see here, in this huge bridges that is accommodate those people, and mostly of the people are elderly, more than 60 years old, so you can imagine what is facilities needed for them, how to organize. They like to walk, they like to move, you know, and We can see some other pictures near the Mosque of Mecca. And this is the profile of Hajj. Some figures around Hajj here. And the rate of people and the age of the pilgrims coming to Mecca. And this is the mosque when it is empty. Actually, there are certain times which is not Hajj. We have this space a little bit empty. There is a big expansion now for this mosque. Now, this is the road, King Abdul Aziz Road, which is about 6 kilometers from the entrance of Mecca to the mosque. 3 kilometers for the people of Mecca and 3 kilometers for the Hajj people. It's and in the middle we have King Abdullah Mosque. Bob, you can take the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Topping. I'm an architect based in Canada and worked with Mukthar on this project. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how the project kind of worked from a consulting perspective. So the project, there was 3 partners. There was basically the contractors, the developers, Al-Qur'um, along with the Al-Modem Consultancy Group and GAATES, worked cooperatively and jointly on this. In terms of the GAATES project team, there was a multinational group. Mukthar was based in Saudi Arabia, my company is based in Canada, and Fry, who's with us this afternoon, is based in the UK, Joseph Kwan in Hong Kong, and Betty Dion in Canada. And we sort of jointly provided guidance to the project team on universal accessibility issues. We started the process with making some sort of very high-level concept statements that would guide the design team as well as guide our review. The first one was very much to do with what Anne was talking about in her keynote this morning about the seamless journey, and that if you're going from A to B, it's really a link of interconnected activities. And in terms of if that link is to be accessible, every link in the chain must be accessible. And a seamless journey is one that can be completed with confidence and comfort and safety regardless of age or ability. Some of the planning assumptions is, and again we were saying this to the design team, unless all the transit modes and interchanges between them meet universal design standards, there will be large numbers of people who are in this country for this event who will not be able to use them. And there will also be many who cannot move through the system at speeds of which operating capacity has been calculated. That was one of the first observations, is that crowd control was a huge issue in this project based on certain assumptions about how fast people move. And when you started to overlay the universal design issues on top of that, our recommendation was that some of their assumptions around those times were far too quick, and that the reality is queuing would be much worse. We certainly were recommending universal design principles as the approach to follow to provide the greatest level of dignity, particularly because most of these pilgrims come from other parts of the world. They're not familiar with the language, they're not familiar with the buildings, they're not familiar with, in many cases, technology, and therefore to sort of deal with this many people in a short time was quite the challenge, and universal design seemed to be a way to address some of the baseline issues of that. And the overarching recommendation we gave to the design team, if they do this right, the project has to be the potential to be an exemplar of best practice in universal design. Again, it was talked about this morning that if you're going to sort of say something is accessible or universally accessible, you need to have some benchmark which to measure that against. And Saudi Arabia as a country is actually quite progressive in this field, and they already had a universal accessibility guidelines for land transportation, and this project included a lot of transportation interchanges, as well as universal accessibility guidelines for the built environment. So there was a really good foundation of standards for universal accessibility within the Arab world, which, using the principles I just went through, were used to sort of give the design team detailed requirements to work with. In terms of the process, we analyzed this huge project by dividing it into 6 different systems: boulevards, private vehicle systems, public transit terminals and interchanges, public transport vehicles, wayfinding, and emergency procedures. So those were the sort of base elements of the review, and then what we did is we overlaid on top of that all of the elements of universal design from those particular design guidelines. So we would review, say, the boulevard systems for all of the elements of accessibility and so on and so forth. And we then gave the design team feedback on what our review of the project gave. I'm just going to whip through these in terms of the areas that we reviewed were things like the pedestrian infrastructure, drop-offs, crosswalks, etc., some of the transportation systems, the interchanges, etc. And what we did is there were some very detailed design reports produced by the project team, and we went through those reports in great detail and analyzed the images and analyzed the written words, and then gave back feedback based on the principles and the detailed elements of design. So we gave a bunch of stuff related to wayfinding, things like tactile paving, making sure paths are clear, signage, all of that sort of stuff.
Requesting you to wrap up, please.
Yes, I will. There were a series of recommendations around signage and information kiosks. Parking, one of the first observations was they didn't have any parking for accessibility, so we picked up those sorts of things. Lighting issues. And then a fair piece to do with fire and life safety, particularly given the audience being older people, as a majority of people being older, and the fact that they are working in an environment they're not familiar with in a different language. So again, we made some recommendations around those issues. Interchanges between different transit systems. There actually was a bus rapid transit system, a subway system, an intercity bus system, and an intercity rail system, all interconnected in this road. So there were some major accessibility challenges. Metro stations, and with that, I'm 30 seconds over, and I will wrap it up.
Yeah,
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Yes, Anne.
I was just going to ask if Bob and Mukthar could say a little bit more about the next stage. Have the recommendations been accepted? When can we see these design concepts being put into construction? Perhaps they could just take us through to the next stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. We just finished the first reviewing of the master plan of the project, and now the second step is to appoint consultants for each area, which they're going to work in drawings, details, work in drawings. And again, we are going to have GAATE involved in that one too. So it's quite a process for such a huge project. Thank you.
I wanted to ask both India and Saudi Arabia, where you have special big events which include so many people, how do you handle the evacuation part, which is a problem also without disability?
Lalita.
Okay. I'm going to leave it up to Abha to answer the details, but since the bridges and all the roadway and signage during Kumbh Mela is organized by the armed forces in India, I would imagine they know that they're going to be not just 11 million, perhaps even more. So if she knows the details, she'll be able to provide it.
We have the administration which comes in. There is Mela and this Kumbh Mela administrator is there, and it's a drill which is followed to the last T. Every precaution is taken, and we have not had a mishap of any magnitude in the past 10 odd Melas. So that itself is very commendable, and not just the safety bit of it. Even if you look at the cleanliness aspect of it, you will find, I mean, we don't have, public conveniences which are as good or as good as in the West. They are makeshift ones. You will not find them completely clean. There is no littering, and these are people who are coming there are maybe completely illiterate also. But somehow the magic of the Mela and the administration, everything works beautifully. So we keep our fingers crossed also. But yes, administratively, a lot of effort which goes into it and a lot of detail which is maintained and rolled out. Thank you.
Just to add to that, just remember this event, the last slide I showed, happens every 12 years. So they have 12 years to rectify any errors that they see. The only problem that was encountered in 2013 was at the railroad station, and I'm sure next time around they'll make sure that there's a better arrangements for people to go to their proper trains and not have a stampede. Thank you.
Our case is different because it's a yearly event, and it in a certain time cannot be split. I mean, one consultant said, why don't you do it the whole year? And that's not fair and not accepted at all. So it is the management of running the whole show. This year there was more than 100,000 military soldiers taking care of the queuing the people and directing the people, because the most difficult thing is the directions. People, when they mix of directions, then the problems happen. So they have to keep them in track. They have to take care of the elderly. They have to take care of the children. They have to take care of plus other governmental agencies, which is take care of. So it's a huge event, and it's yearly, and it is it's not that easy to manage 5 million people in one directions in the same spots, moving from one spot to another. So the transportation is another big issue, how to transport them from one area to another. And recently we are using trains now between Arafah and Mina, and these trains are the largest massive trains in the world that could carry hundreds of thousands of people in one shot, one direction. So it is it's a big management, actually. It is a unique management. It doesn't happen anywhere. One said, okay, I mean, it's a holy place and the people have to come. And the diversity of people coming from Africa, from Asia, from all type of part of the world, elderly, less education, less knowledge to this event. It's not like in India, for instance, they are all one Indians, but here we have variety of 130 countries around the world, people coming from there. It's a very interesting issue, and we are trying now to use all the models of mass management. It's bigger than, they said, okay, let's just see what Disneyland is doing, or let us say to see what the sport people are doing, but it's not the case. This is really something different completely, so that's it. You have to test, to try to feel it. But anyway, it is once a life. I mean, for the Muslims, it's not necessary every year. No, it is once a life. So, to the people who could afford it, like for instance, from India, the Indian Muslims, they pay more than for 25 years installment before they can get the money to come to Mecca. And the poor, they take the ships to Jeddah, the others they take airplanes, so it is a matter of management in different countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I have a question concerning Saudi Arabia. We're talking about huge masses of people. It's still quite easy to build new things, new installations, new equipment, buses, trains, everything. We are talking about a World Heritage Site. Still, there are many buildings which were constructed hundreds of years ago. How do you adapt to them? Because it's quite easy for me to imagine that you can transport all those people, but once they are there, what do you do? Because it's a problem like in Europe with all historic heritage, it's easy to get people to the old city, but the problem is the old city itself. So I imagine it's roughly the same problem in Mecca. When you travel, it's okay, but when you get there, it's an old place, you cannot just change everything there, I imagine.
We have big project now in Mecca for the last 5 years. King Abdul Aziz Road is one of them, to accommodate, the tourists who are coming, in more sophisticated accommodations. So that road is going to be a model in Mecca, or there are going to be 5 others models coming to the direction to the mosque, because the mosque is in the center of the city, and it linked with roads coming from different directions. So the major roads now is going to be a model like the one we are building now, King Abdul Aziz Road. Around the mosque there are hotels, there are buildings specialized to be used for the Hajj, the pilgrims who are coming to Mecca. Transporting them from there to the mosque and back 4 or 5 times a day, it is another big issue. So the whole city, doubled its occupancy. I mean, there are the residents who are living in Mecca 12 months, and there are people who are more than them. They come in a short time. So that type of management for the services, for the education, for health, it's all doubled. It's a unique situation, but the people are adapt to it, because it is 1,400 years now, people coming. But nowadays with airplanes, there's a massive, that each airplane can get you 500, 400 tourists, or coming in a short time, and then the whole people comes before they take 3 months to come, and the 3 months is to leave. Nowadays it is 1 month coming and leaving. So that's another management where they go to the airport and they have to schedule them going and in buses to the airport and leaving and receiving them also. And there's another thing that they have to go to Medina, which is another 450 kilometers, the Prophet city. So that's another trip to Medina and back forth. So we have a Ministry of Hajj which work only for this. It's a complete ministry just for this issue, the Hajj. So it's a big management. Yes.
Can I just add something to that particular piece?
It's not about Saudi Arabian, but Enfry asked, what's the next step there? I believe that we need to make these questions for every country, because I travel. I'm in Canada. Lila is in the same hotel as me. They say it's successful. I have a bed like that. I can't transpire. The shower is not good. We are making advance all around the world. We have the historical cities of Spain and other cities. In Rio, it's also different. We have the mega events, and we need to make it completely accessible. But for me, this is the reason of this summit, not to be one more summit, one more conference. This is why we, me, Abba, and many persons of the program committee discussed that we need to go ahead. We need to make standards. We need to make many things. The world is not good. You have a city that the transport is good. You have the old cities, and there are too much to be done and to train persons. In the hotel, they don't understand. I told in a meeting that we have, I needed to make changes in my room. And they took the table, they took a chair, put it in front of the mirror and told if it was okay. And, oh, why? To put in front of the mirror. I want to look myself. And I believe that everywhere there are cities that are better than others. There are cities that are going in the right directions. But we need to make a network, a global network, the declaration that you received, and we need to discuss this globally, because it's a problem of all the world, not only Rio de Janeiro, Saudi Arabia, India, it's all, we have problems everywhere. This is what I think.
Yeah, and high
The
time-
next step.
Absolutely right, and high time we stop making adjustments to make other feel comfortable. We also need to feel comfortable. The environment around, especially the built environment, has to have and follow standards which are universal standards so that each and everyone feels welcome. I believe you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, it was just to get back to the gentleman's comment about how you deal with the sort of historic infrastructure. My observation as a somewhat of an outsider is that certainly in the two holy mosque sites in Saudi Arabia, they are doing massive new construction to deal with that. There are certain pieces of those mosques that are sacrosanct and cannot be touched. But I think in both cases, the mosques are being enlarged enormously, probably 20-fold, if not more than that, in terms of new construction around them. And this King Abdul Aziz Road project was viewed as a link with development along all 6 kilometers of new hotels, of new buildings or whatever, to provide a fully accessible link into the holy sites. So my observation is that they're not, the kingdom is not doing a lot of renovation of existing. They are building new infrastructure in a manner that if somebody needs that level of accessibility, as an example, they will go to that. So I mean, it's quite unusual. I've been quite surprised at how extensive the renovations have been to these holy sites, in terms of the scale of it, as well as the desire to have it universally accessible.
I'll just quickly make another comment regarding this about historical sites and monuments being made accessible. Religious is one aspect, but even the World Heritage sites. We've had an experience in India when my organization SWAYAM started advocating about accessibility in World Heritage sites. It was a difficult task to convince everybody, because everybody thought the moment you have any intervention which is undertaken at that point in time, it will take away from the originality of that monument, and we have to preserve them the way they are. But monuments are for people to connect with their past. They have to be welcoming to everybody. It took us 3 years to convince the junior most level person who was going to make those changes. Once we convinced him, we have made 4 World Heritage sites in India completely accessible. So it is, you have to be at it, you have to keep going.
I've spent many years on ISO committees, and it turned out to be arguments between North America and Europe on the precise nature and even definition of many, many things. I agree we should have standards, but we have to think very carefully just what standards we want. I have a strong belief in performance standards. I've been very involved in wheelchair accessibility within transport, and to try to define a wheelchair space within a vehicle, and given the entry and exit aspects of this, is almost impossible to just give dimensions. All of you wheelchair users here know all about manoeuvring.
Absolutely.
And so the performance requirement developed as a reference size wheelchair being able to maneuver into a space with no more than 3 reverses. Something like that, rather than saying it must be 1.3 meters by 800 or some whatever. So a strong plea for thinking very carefully about standards. We also are on the verge of having to change all our transport accessibility standards because of the growing obesity of North America in particular, and Europe to a lesser extent. So it's a moving feast. We also have cultural differences that could make a difference in how a standard can be used within a particular country. Brazil is not the same as Saudi Arabia, etc., or we can make all the differences we can. Please, in this plea for, in the development of this particular conference, calling for standards, be very careful what you wish for.
You're right, Campbell,
Can I
there,
talk
because...
something?
Sure.
You're right. About standards, I've been in Buffalo discussing with the architect Edward Steinfeld, and we have a great discussion. And it's time to build standards for universal design. We don't need to think more about accessibility. We have many standards everywhere about accessibility. We don't have for universal design. We can't think anymore about a group of persons with disability. Accessibility is linked to persons with disability for many years. And now we have to think about standards for universal design. You told me about the rate you need for a wheelchair. We need to think different. We need to think about everybody.
Very well said. I mean, we've been having a huge task about harmonizing various standards within a nation. If we create a body of standards or something which is acceptable universally, that would be great. And maybe you could also take up about the seating when we're talking about obesity in aircrafts at the cost of, the economy, people flying economy. I mean, those seats are being squeezed like crazy. Something needs to be done about that. I mean, somebody in my nation had said cattle class. Let's not reduce it to cattle class, please. So, something to think about and ponder about. 2.5 minutes, so we have time for 2 more questions. Regina, you did get a fair share of your questions now.
What?
You did get a fair share of your questions.
Yeah.
After one.
Yeah.
Yashwant, you are very quiet there. No questions from you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can't be quiet for long.
Thank you. I'm a member of the ISO TC59 committee, and we've been working for the last 7 years to produce an international standard for the built environment and accessibility, the first ISO accessibility standard. It took 7 years, and the discussion were between 30 countries, developed countries, and I used to present the other 150 countries. I always, have the directions in that issue. The standard is a minimum criteria which provide, that any country can adopt, especially the countries who have no standards, like in Africa or in other countries in the world. So it is really a good tool to be used, but the major thing is training the architects, engineers about it. I mean, the disability community requests for many things, but the architect and the engineers are a little bit away from this request. So they need training, they need workshops, they need a lot of activities, so they can understand and they can know how to apply these standards in their project, to look to the universal design in a good way, so it can be applied. So the tourism is a big industry. It's one of the biggest industries in the world. The revenue is very high, and the need for accessible and enabled cities is more and more now demand. So we hope after the end of this conference something will come up as and I'd like to see more conferences happening in different countries in the world, so as a transit which is being running now every 2 years around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I mentioned, yes, please, your question.
My name is Katerina Papamikhail and I'm an architect from Greece. I took advantage of what Mr. Mukthar said about the ISO standard because I was attending a group of experts for a European Commission study about the need of a European standard for accessibility. And as we discovered, and as we all know, we said that yes, we need something based on ISO, which is accepted by most countries, because we need to define accessibility in a common way. So the standard we're talking about is just the basic, is the minimum to understand and define accessibility in the same way. So we understand and we say the same things. But what I would like to say, and I think I would like to propose it for this declaration, everything lies on the decision makers. And I have a dream which maybe will never come true. I want to see the decision makers in every country that I think they change maybe every year, to have an annual obligatory course to understand the issues, to understand that accessibility is just common sense, sustainable development, and it's also money. It's money for each country, and we have to leave the empty words for social inclusion that most of the politicians really say, but they don't believe. They have to understand the issues, and for me, this is where the problem lies. To the decision makers, they have to get educated so they can educate the architects and all the other people. Thank you.
So thank you so much. The discussion session was quite invigorating and got everybody involved. And Campbell, it is 12:35. So I may take leave from all of you before we are thrown out of this room. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.